listening to the Patriot Nation Podcast.
All right, welcome into the Patriot Nation Podcast, part of the CLNS Brotherhood of Podcasts. We appreciate you joining us. As always here, it's Pat Lane with my guy, Matt St. Jean. And today we are joined by a very special guest, former Patriots linebacker, the creator or owner of Rub Smoke Love. It is Matt Chatham here to kick off our conversation about the 21-game streak 21 years later. And what better guy to do that than a player who played there, Matt Chatham. So thanks, Matt, for joining us.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Yep. Very excited to get into it. And listen, it's a hell of an accomplishment, an unbelievable accomplishment. Of course, Patriots would go 16-0 a few years later and not complete that streak. But this streak is one of the ones that I just think, I don't know if it'll ever be broken. I don't want to say a record will never be broken, because that just seems foolish to say. But man, 21 wins is so hard. And right now, number one, the closest team to doing it right now is Philadelphia, who's at 6. So, it's just, when you look at it like that, you're just like, I think Kansas City has come the closest, and they had 15 in a row or something like that.
Right. And
it's just it's so incredibly hard to do. And so, pretty unbelievable achievement.
Yeah, and I think what makes it unique is that, clearly you're involving 2 different seasons, so you're including 2 different groups, quite frankly. So you're hoping the next group with, a quarter or so turnover on a team, which is typical, maybe a third, I don't remember the year, but you're asking a lot of people to get up to speed quickly and to continue to play at the high level that they were already, right? And not let up. So it's getting not a whole group, but a whole bunch of new people to buy into the similar sort of MO and keep it rolling. So it was fun, and it was fun to be a part of.
That's great. Love it. All right, let's get into, without further ado, Matt, you want to set the stage for game 1 of the 21-game streak?
Yeah, and for those who are just finding out about this now, we're doing 11 episodes in a row here, 2 games per episode, breaking down this whole streak. So we're going to have some fun reliving this summer. Game 1, this is October 5th, 2003, Charlotte Stadium, 1 o'clock game, Patriots hosting the Titans. The Patriots at this point, 2-2. On the season, lost the week before in Washington, lost the opener in Buffalo 31-0. Lawyer Malloy cut the team's 11-9 since winning the Super Bowl. So, a bit of turbulence there, and the Patriots are injured. Ted Washington, Roosevelt Colvin, Ted Johnson, Mike Vrabel, and Willie McGinnis all out for this game, and Ty Law playing injured. So a lot of guys banged up. Titans are 3-1. They blew out the Steelers the week before. The last time these teams met was on Monday Night Football the year before. At the end of the season, Titans won that one 24-7. There were 4 touchdowns in that game. McNair had 2 rushing touchdowns. Brady had a rushing touchdown, and there was a pick six. It's that kind of game. Yeah. The head coach for the Titans, Jeff Fisher. And with all that, the Patriots still favored in this game by just a single point, but not the biggest story in Boston sports at the time, because at 1 o'clock the same day at Fenway Park, the ALDS, the Red Sox hosting the A's down 2-1 in that series, looking to tie it up and send it to a game 5. So that's where we are in the season for the Patriots. Your starters, Tom Brady, Antoine Smith, Deion Branch, Troy Brown, David Patton, Christian Fourier, Matt Light, Damian Woody, Dan Copen, Joe Andruzzi, Tom Ashworth. On defense, Bobby Hamilton, Richard Seymour, Ty Warren, Jarvis Green, our man here, Matt Chatham at outside linebacker, Roman Pfeiffer, Teddy Bruschi, Ty Law, Tyrone Poole, Eugene Wilson, and Rodney Harrison, which, after reading that list of players on defense who are missing, just to be missing those players and to still trot out that starting defensive lineup is absolutely insane. Before we get into the game, Matt, do you want to talk about what it was like just to play with all these guys?
Well, yeah, I mean, as you were going through it, I was like, yeah, that's a lot of dudes to be gone. And I'm like, but wait, we're going to go through Richard. It's still Brew. It's still Fife. And still Gino on the back end. And he was an excited young player at the time. And it's just an incredibly deep team, dude. And it was fun, really all those years. with the linebacker room that we had, and that was kind of what we were sort of, we would jokingly say we almost had two starting groups. There's a 3-4 group, and you've got 4 linebackers, and your second wave in my opinion, obviously, and I'm a part of that opinion, so obviously I'm a little biased, but I think that group could have stepped in and started a lot of the places in the leagues and been very effective. So, but we pride ourselves on it, and this was that season where we needed it, right? Willie got banged up a little bit at times, and Fife got banged up a little bit at times, but Fife was an absolute warrior. He would log games with 100 rep games, and in addition to his special team stuff. Braves, I believe, at some point in the year has a broken forearm. I think Willie's was a back or something like that. But it was just a lot of cycling in our linebacker room. So it was good that we were deep. We needed it.
Yeah.
Well, despite all that talent that was mentioned, this game did not necessarily get off to a hot start. Patriots missed 2 field goals under 40 yards in the first half.
Yeah.
Brady gets sacked on a 4th and 1. Patriots have a punt return for a touchdown that gets called back due to a penalty. So you go into the half down 13-7.
Yeah.
Very defensive first half.
Yeah.
That changes in the second half.
Yep.
No punts in the second half. 5 lead changes. Patriots eventually get on top for good with a Mike Cloud touchdown run with about less than 4 minutes left in the game. Mike Cloud coming off of a suspension, his first game that season, and then Ty Law with a pick 6 right at the 2-minute warning to seal the deal. Pats
limping the whole way. Yeah, limping the whole way. If you remember, he's accentuating that limp. Make sure everyone knew.
I do want to back this up for a second, though, because Matt, this is also, at least according to the stats, your first NFL start. You were part of the base unit the week before against Washington, but according to that, the stats, this is your first start. At what point did you know you were going to be with the top unit, and what's that feeling like when you're getting called up to be in that moment?
Yeah, well, like you mentioned, Matt, sort of backing up a week, and this is kind of the way this stuff works in the NFL. Like, you'll practice all week as the starter, and I did in the week prior against the Redskins. But I am very much special teams and a rotational base defense guy, right? So I'm really comfortable with a tight end, can set the hell out of the edge. Don't pass rush so well, and am professionally competent as a coverage guy, right? So if the other team decides, hey, we're going 11 personnel, or they're going to go 12 with a smaller dude, and they want to throw the ball, we were always a team that would match them with nickel. And Roman Pfeiffer comes on the field. Fife is a stud. Fife is one of the better coverage linebackers at the time. He could take backs and tight ends and go sideline to sideline. He's a really good player. So if you come out, you practice all week thinking, hey, I'm going to get my big start against the Redskins. Here we go. And the first play is not a base defensive play that you didn't start, I guess, technically. But did get back in there and play. And we were chatting a little bit at that off air. That was kind of a cool thing for me, because in that Redskins game, I was across from a tight end from the University of Iowa, where I'm from. We're both from Sioux City. A guy named Zeron Flemister. Zeron and I competed against each other head to head in basketball and football and track. I was terrible at that. But we were opposite in baseball, really opposite everything. So we were kind of the 2 top prep guys from my hometown, and came out, first half of the game I was in, I'm opposite Zeron, and I hadn't talked to him, I think, since high school. I was like, hey, Z, what's up? And that was literally it. We're in the middle of RFK, and it's like tiny world. But so that was technically my first big, get the jitters out, get your first, not start, but first play, but lots of playing time kind of thing. And then at least a linebacker. And then the next week it was full bore. But the one point I'll make about, getting to play a little bit more linebacker, even in games where I didn't start, it was still, 15 to 20 plays of defense. You're a rotational guy, drives go long. It would either be Willie or Vrabes or occasionally Rosie. It just kind of depended on what was going on, what the packages were. So the Pats were always really good at, we didn't really have too many guys that don't play, and all of a sudden you got to play kind of thing. It's like the backups play. So I think that's something that's a little bit of a misnomer in the NFL, at least back then. I mean, maybe now they have guys who are strictly special teams, but that really wasn't the case. So I didn't feel that unprepared. It's just kind of cool to, be in the starting lineup and come out and all that stuff, right?
No, it's cool. Yeah. That's really cool. And so if we can even, obviously we talked about you in this situation, but as a fan, right, as a guy that was, I was in college and I was paying attention, and, of course, they come out. You guys lose 31-0 against the Bills in Week 1, and Tom Jackson proclaims, this team hates their coach, right? And of course, then you rattle off 2 wins, and you go down to Washington and lose to what everyone considered to be kind of a crappy Washington team, right?
Definitely was.
And so there was some real questions, and as Matt mentioned, you go 11-9 since the Super Bowl wins. A lot of questions about, where is this team headed and what's happening here? And of course, talk radio wasn't as maybe as toxic as it is now. But certainly some questioning going on. And I'm just curious about, we obviously know what happened after that, right? We're here talking about 21 straight games, but what was the feeling like in the locker room kind of heading into that game? And with that kind of uncertainty looming over the team, I would say.
I would say one of the things that happens when you're on a Patriot team in any given year is, like you mentioned, the talk radio, less toxic then, but still, having to really dig deep into this thing and beat it up if we're good enough, if the right people are here, if we should be doing what we're doing, if they're being coached right, all that kind of stuff. But you're kind of oblivious to it all, especially in the absence of social media, right? So I don't watch much TV, to be honest. Coach Belichick was notorious for printing out. You basically so think back to those times, like he'd take Projo, whatever was in the Providence Journal, and print every article out alongside the Herald, alongside the Globe, alongside maybe Patriot Ledger, maybe Sun Chronicle, like whatever anybody put to print was printed, stapled, and would, be kind of sprinkled around the building. And some guys would read that crap when you're, kind of on a treadmill or something like that, or a stair climber. So you could, if you wanted to see it, you could see it. If you'd have done something messed up and you knew they were talking about you, maybe you go take a peek. But I think by and large, the big picture of what was going on is not something Bill really likes to let you look at. Your thoughts are more to, well, how did I grade out in that Washington game? And is my role going to increase a little bit this week or less? Not me, just any guy on the team. And you really fight on that team for getting to do a little more each week. And, the conversations and arguments are more between your position coach, for me, Rob Ryan and Pep Johnson, Pepper, trying to, just get their faith in you. And even when things maybe didn't go well, hey, did I prove a little bit more? Can I earn some more time? So I think it really boils down to more of that stuff on the ground for each little guy in each position group, and in the running back room, in the tight end room, tackles. You guys mentioned Tom Ashworth. Tom really ascended in this season. I don't think, Tom was a tight end at one point for Colorado and becomes a starting right tackle in the NFL. So there was a lot of guys sort of just finding their way, I think, around this time. So the notion of where we were going to be and what we might win and where we are relative to the last time winning the Super Bowl, I don't think that was on many people's mind. It was just keeping your job.
Yeah. Now, did you have a feeling internally that it could be as good as it did? Like, obviously, you're going to have some confidence in yourself. You have to have confidence playing in the NFL. You're going to feel well prepared.
Right.
But do you think, we can go win a Super Bowl when you're at this point? Or are you really just thinking week to week?
Well, I think we were super excited about the roster. And you mentioned Ted Washington. I mean, that was exciting to get that kind of guy. And now Big C can pop out the end. Mm-hmm. Seymour as a rookie had played, I think he actually played some nose in that first Super Bowl that he was in the 0-1 game when he was a rookie. So, it just kind of, this version, you're now seeing Bill kind of, he recruited heavily. He's drafted now a few times, and this is kind of his people, right? Fife is in an expanded role. Teddy Bruschi is really more. Bruce kind of started to be more of an actual Mike linebacker, where the era prior to us all arriving, Big Ted is your Mike, and Teddy is the kind of sometimes edge pass rusher, but he plays Will. Andy Katzenmoyer was the up and coming young guy, and I believe Ted had torn a bicep or something at the time and was getting more time. But the point is, Brew really starts ascending in the middle of this stuff too, right? And as a middle linebacker, which is not what he did at Arizona and wasn't, I don't think, what Pete or even Parcells, I don't know if he dates back that far, but had him doing early on. So a lot of this is kind of guys finding new roles. What are they going to do? Willie McGinnis, I mean, Willie's an absolute stud. He's the, rare guy on our particular defense. Well, him and Seymour, I guess. But, Bill's got Willie playing true outside linebacker in a 3-4. Willie was, this ain't going to get you in the Pro Bowl, but Willie was probably one of the most dangerous guys extended on a wide receiver in the NFL, because it's this guy that's like, what is he doing out here? It's like Javon Curse or some guy like that, like freakish big, long, 6'5", 6'6", whatever he is, with great length, looks like a power forward, basically rerouting slots and tight ends and stuff. And he just killed routes. And, meanwhile, the guy who does go, Jason Taylor or whatever, is, he's rushing every down. So he was being asked to do new and different things and was still adjusting to it. And he ended up being exceptional at it, obviously. But I think that's a little bit of what's going on with that team. Like, you had some new faces like Big Ted, but then the draft class with Asante and Gino, Eugene Wilson,
Ty Warren too.
Ty Warren, yeah. Exactly. And that was, now we're really spending on the D-line, and just, that crew across. If you have Seymour, Ted Washington, and Tiny at the other side, McGinnis next to him, Vrabes on the other side, and they can flip-flop in a minute, and any number of those middle linebackers we mentioned to pop in there. That group, that core was absolutely stacked. So
yeah.
And then you got, a young Rodney on the back, youngish Rodney still on the back. So, there's so much talent on that team. So we were excited about where it was going to go. Maybe we weren't happy with what we were doing that early in the year, though.
So you mentioned some of the young players. Another guy I want to mention here is Dan Klecko.
Oh, yeah. Kleck's one of my good buddies. Absolutely, yeah. Yeah,
and he's a guy who's on defense, special teams, and, playing fullback at points in this game on Mike Cloud touchdown runs.
Yeah.
What was that like, playing with someone who's playing all three phases? And you had him and Vrabel as guys who would play in all three phases.
So Kleck, remember, he came from Temple. He was the Big East defensive player of the year, his senior year. But I don't know if is Dan 5'10"? Dan's short. And he's one of my good buddies. I can bust his balls about this, but he was not a tall man. So, and I think that's probably part of what, trying to figure out what to do with him, because he was so incredibly disruptive. It's like, is he going to be just like a pass rush only guy on the interior? I think there were years in camp where they tried to maybe see if he could play outside linebacker. He would do some stuff on teams like you mentioned. Then he's just like fullback in short yardage. And, it was just like, Dan's a really good football player, but what are we going to do with Dan, especially in those early years? Like, we're going to have to figure something out with him. But back in those days, we all lived in the same condo complex, a bunch of us anyway, over in Bellingham. So Dan Copen, and you all obviously remember Marquise Hill, who unfortunately passed away years later, LSU guy. But Cope and Kleck and myself and Marquise and Matt Castle later, and there was a whole bunch of guys, but we almost had like a dorm kind of feel over in this sort of local condo complex. But just a bunch of young guys coming up at the same time, trying to keep a job.
That's great. I love it. A lot of really kind of crazy plays in this one. Of course, the Tom Brady pass, which it's funny, we talk about, kind of where the Patriots were in this moment, right? And Brady throws a 60-yard touchdown, 58-yard touchdown pass to Troy Brown, which, by the way, looks almost identical to a game we're going to talk about later on in the week, the Miami game, where he stiff arms the guy in the back, the offensive lineman in the back, and then resets and throws it deep to Troy. And then you have Vinatieri, as we mentioned, missing 2 field goals. He had gone 33 straight kicks with not missing a field goal inside 40 yards, and he goes 0 for 2 inside 40, which is just almost unheard of from him. Yeah. The Brady touchdown pass to Brown was the first quarter touchdown by the Patriots in 7 games, dating back to 2002. So, we talk about this team as if they were incredible, and they were. You guys were fantastic, but then it was, leading into this was that kind of inconsistent, certainly offensive play, and so just kind of it's interesting. And then of course the second half comes, and neither team punts, right? And so, offensively and defensively, I guess, both teams are going off offensively. As a defensive player, when that happens and it just feels like the game's almost a little out of control, right? Where does that, how do you guys kind of rally around that? Because obviously you end the game with a pick 6, right? And so that kind of ends it in that situation. But it was like, neither defense can get a stop. And so, what is that like as a defender?
So This is fuzzy, but I'll go with my best recollection. At least I know by profile and what Bill would talk about with these guys, kind of what Tennessee is about and what's unique about Tennessee relative to other teams. Tennessee's big. Like, they're big at every position. Like, if you go down their wide receiver group, I believe Justin McCarron's was there at the time. He was a teammate of mine later with the Jets. Drew Bennett's like a 6'5" wide receiver. Derek Mason's not a huge guy, but a super duper productive guy. I'm like 6 or 7 1,000-yard seasons. They're big as you get at the tight end. When Aaron Kenny was a top, I think his first round or maybe second round pick out of Florida, but Aaron Kenny's like 6'6", 280. When you watch film, the end zone copy, the back of Aaron Kenny's bottom half looks bigger than the tackle. Like, yeah, Aaron Kenny. So that was a huge, challenge for me coming into that game, knowing that this is one of the better blocking tight ends in the NFL, and it's almost like you're basically going against a tackle every snap. So, and he's now a fire chief somewhere here in Massachusetts, married a girl from up here, I believe, and they settled here. So, but then Eddie George, let's see, one of the bigger backs in the league, super productive guy, across the offensive line.
Shad Meyer.
Yeah, Shad Meyer was younger, the other tight end. Yeah, I don't. Let's see, who was the other back? I'm trying to. The point of this,
Chris Brown.
No, it was a guy that used to be with the Rams. I was there for a cup of coffee as a young guy, and he was there with us as well. Robert Holcomb, I think it's Robert. Yeah, I think Robert was there. Anyways, the point of the crew was just think from a like a building a roster standpoint, they got all the big guys. Like this is a team that's going to be like a first off the bus kind of thing, and they love to run the football. And you got to stop them running the football. And as bad as that score got, we were pretty successful in that in the first half. And I think they kind of got out of that mode of running and had most of their success through the air. And that's when, the wheels came off a little bit for us in the second half. And I don't know, I at least came out of it feeling really pleased with the first half, because, you're getting a greater role, it's stopping the run, and I don't get the pass downs. I got to come out because I can't pass rush. So I'm just more of a, set the edge and get tackles and play special teams kind of guy. So I think in review and looking back, this thing has a little feel like the Super Bowl that ends up happening that same year with us in Carolina, where it's just like a bloodbath in the first half, really good defensive half for really both sides. And then, an injury too happens, and it just gets a little out of hand in the second half. And this kind of had that same feel. Like, it just felt like two different games almost.
Yeah. Well, it's funny. You mentioned the stuff through the air. One name that we didn't mention who was on Tennessee in this game was kind of their breakout star, Tyrone Calico at wide receiver.
Yeah.
He had two catches of over 40 yards. He was
Another
rookie.
big guy. Another big guy.
Yeah.
But again, by profile.
He had 92 yards.
Yeah.
He had 92 yards that day, which is a career high. He would have 92 yards the next week, and then he never had more than 51 yards in a game for the rest of his career. So kind of a young guy where it looks like this is a breakout moment for him. It obviously doesn't materialize, but that's where the Titans were kind of finding success in the second half. It was just a lot of those big chunk plays through the air, and teams kind of went back and forth. Calico had 2 of these. Mike Cloud had like a 40-yard run. Bethel Johnson has a 71-yard kickoff return, which sets up the game-winning touchdown.
Yep.
So a lot of those big plays from both sides.
We had a big one there, and I want to recall. I hope I have this right, but Rocky Boyman is a guy that I did some media with later. He was a linebacker for Tennessee, and Brad Castle was a teammate of mine, was a captain as I was with the Jets later. We were all competing really hard on special teams. And that group, by and large, was considered, we were always really considered one of the better special teams groups. And you're mentioning a game where we've missed a couple field goals, but we are not, we had the big play with Troy, but it's not like we were really lighting it up. So we needed some change of field. And this new guy, Bethel, is like, man, this dude is fast. And if we can just give him a gap, and if it just happens once a game, that's like, almost earning a full field with him. So it was good that we could contribute that way. We needed it.
Yeah, it's cool. You mentioned Kinney. I looked it up because I was curious. It's Norfolk, Mass, and he's been the fire chief there since 2019.
I live in Rentham, Norfolk. My kids go to KP. Norfolk is literally. How did I not know it was Norfolk where he was?
Really? Your kids play in the Hawk, huh? Okay. Yeah, I didn't know. Do they play any sports?
Yeah, my son's a guard and a defensive tackle for KP.
Oh,
Going to
nice.
be a senior.
That's awesome.
He's going to be interesting. I think he should be heavily recruited this season,
That's
but
great.
it's going to be an interesting year for him because he shouldn't have been recruited based upon what happened last year. I mean, the kid is 6'1", 6'2" if he's lying, and maybe 220 pounds, and he's trying to play, just trying to figure out what he is. And right now, as we just were at the BC prospect camp last weekend, he's 6'3", about 270 now. So the kid's almost gained 45, 50 pounds in less than 6 months.
Unreal.
And so, he's only going to have 1 year at that new body to play out here. But I think he's going to be an absolute monster. So it's going to be fun to see what he does this year.
I teach down in Taunton, so I'm very familiar with KP.
Yeah.
It's our Taunton's big rival. I feel like in most sports. So
his name's Lex. He'll be their left tackle, and I presume right defensive end, maybe D tackle. You'll see him there. But he's
that's great.
Even his own teammates don't even recognize him. Like, who the hell is he just looks like a different human. But I played my freshman year at USD, where I went to school, FCS program, University of South Dakota, similar to UNH and URI and those guys out here. I played my freshman season as a free safety. So I was this height, 6'4.5", almost 6'5", and I played at 190. And I played in the NFL at 255. So we're kind of this Chatham thing, this kind of pops later. So
late bloomers.
Nothing wrong with that. And with NIL and transfer portal and everything else, that's
it's always opportunities.
There you go.
One thing I wanted to circle back to, just going back to halftime of this game and in general with Belichick. If you have games where the first half just does not go the way you hope or think it's going to go, what is the locker room like?
I don't have a specific. I got to be careful here. When I see other guys go back and retell games and remember details, I'm going, you don't remember that much. I had that thing. It's almost like more of a feeling with Bill because Bill was so incredibly consistent. That was kind of the cool thing. It was always hurried. You always felt stressed. We got to get, because usually it's not about castigating a guy or whatever for what they did or what they didn't do. It's more about teaching, right? Okay, they're doing this to us. We've seen it 6 times, but we don't have it right. The guys are coming down from the box. That's usually Pepper and Rob Ryan, and they've got a bunch of stuff written up on the board and printouts and everything. We got to play this way now and play this that way now. We're doing well on this. This is good. That's good. So it's really more about nuts and bolts, getting it fixed, right? Before we get back out there. But it's not really you guys stink, you got to turn it around. It's not really speeches. It's more logistics. We got to fix this. How do we fix it? It's kind of more of a problem solving atmosphere.
Yeah. Well, I feel like people think about it in what happens in a movie, and it's just not.
No.
Yeah.
Yeah. Especially if to get retaped. Or if you have to, I don't know if I can do this on this one. If you have to take a shit, or if you have to go retape an ankle, retape a thumb, have somebody working your hamstring, then you're missing out on that 3 or 4 minutes of new install. It's stressful. It is just fast. It's not
trying to do a lot, not a lot of time. Oh, and there's
exactly.
It takes 2 minutes to get back into the locker room. You got to do your stuff. You got to get back to the field. You got to get ready.
Exactly.
What is it? It's only 12 minutes, 15 minutes.
Yeah, I don't even remember the number. It's fast, whatever it is. So
yeah. So we talked about the Bethel Johnson kick return, but the kick return set up the Mike Cloud touchdown, and that is so I sit in the end zone as I was mentioned before. That's one of the sickest moves I've ever seen in my entire life.
He's got that kind of. You know what it has? Mike has that back in the old Madden. One of the triggers, where you slide step. He has that set you up and slide and replace, and then goes downhill quickly. He was a shifty guy, and he came in and was just there for a short time, but had a big impact, and we needed it.
Yeah, when a play like that happens, when you're on the sideline, play like that happens, everyone stand up oh god, watching the replay and the board, love it. It's so cool. To make a play like that, and the guy comes off, and everyone's mobbing him. That must be an unreal feeling.
Well, it's a cool moment because the guy hadn't been there, then is, and now he's elevated, and then you have a moment like that, and everyone gets fired up for sure.
That's cool.
He said after the game it was some kind of a trap play, and he just saw that there was one man to beat the defensive end on the backside, so he just cut it back. And then once he gets around the defensive end, it's just him and the safety, and that's when he throws that move out there, and
Unbelievable.
then it's 6.
Yeah. I mean, and to a lot of us, when you're going to recall the whole 21 game thing, and I often think of that game even in my head just for crib notes or the Cliff Notes version of the game. That's the Mike Cloud game. Like that's kind of how we all remember it.
Well, here's what I'll say, and I think this is a perfect segue into the next game, because that may have been the Mike Cloud game, but the next game, the next week at home, October 12th against the Giants.
Yeah,
I think of that game as the Matt Chatham game, because how could you not think of that game as the Matt Chatham game, right? With, of course, the fumble return for a touchdown. Pretty incredible. And so that's one of those plays. Now, how long was that? I'm sure you remember. I'm sure you know the exact.
It's 38 yards. Yeah.
So okay. So
which I think is actually the same number, the jersey number, the defensive back who shot in and made the excellent play to knock it free.
Was it Tyrone Poole?
It was Tyrone Poole.
So T Poole. I'm almost positive we're 38. I hope that's right, because that's kind of how I remember the number. Yeah.
That's pretty cool. That's an interesting. And how many points you scored the last week against Tennessee as well. So,
there you go.
How about that?
And also, I'm more than willing to bust my own balls about my pass rush ability. I think in my career I had maybe 2.5, maybe the number was 3.5 sacks in the 9 seasons. So sacks were not my thing. I had one in this game, and it went down as the half, and I think I had to share it with Jarvis Green. It was on Kerry Collins. That was mine. That I will argue with, and Jarvis, I say this to him every time I see him, that you did not get a half sack on that. That was all me. I pulled him down. That was a JOP. You jumped on the pile, and I desperately need a single sack stat at that point. I actually got one, and I didn't get credit.
Yeah. Oh my goodness.
Before we jump ahead to that game real quick, I just want to throw out a couple notes from the week of that Titans game.
Matt's frozen. I don't know if we
his iPad battery's getting low.
iPad battery's running low. I don't know if we lost him. We may have lost him.
We'll give it a second here and see if he comes back. While we wait on that.
Let's see. I removed him we'll see if we can figure it out. Anyways, keep going.
Yes. All right. So other things that happened in week 5. This was the Monday night game where the Colts came back. They were down 35-14 in Tampa Bay, and they came back to win that game in overtime. An iconic Peyton Manning game. There was also a Dante Hall, I don't know who remembers him, returner for the Chiefs. He had a 93-yard punt return for a touchdown to win a game for the Chiefs. It was when they did the NFL 100 top 100 plays of all time. This was number 62 on it.
How about that?
Yeah, it's an incredible play. Another note here. Very small note, but there was a game that week between the Bears and the Raiders that featured Rich Gannon against Cordell Stewart, the 2 quarterbacks the Patriots played in the 0-1 playoffs. 2 guys going against each other. Paul Ettinger for the Bears kicks a field goal as time expires to win that one. The Red Sox did also win that game that day. If you watch the broadcast of this, you'll see there's a moment. Troy Brown has a punt return called back for a touchdown. The crowd starts losing their minds cheering because Donnie Damon just hit a home run. Then there's another moment later. There's a couple moments in this game where bad things happen to the Patriots, and the crowd loses it cheering because the Red Sox just did something. They do eventually win that game and win that series. You've got promos in this one for the new CBS comedy, 2.5 Men. Episode 3 of that show ever would air the next day. And as a final note, you get a promo for SEC on CBS the following week. This would be Florida at number 6 LSU. Florida would win that game 19-7. It's the only time LSU was going to lose all season long on their way to win a national championship. But the guy who caught Florida's first touchdown, running back Ran Carthon, a name you might know because he was the GM in Tennessee that Mike Vrabel got into a power struggle with, which is part of the reason he's in New England today. So small world there.
Yep, lots of memories back, I should say. Interesting, a lot of connections. So let's do a quick ad. Let's do a quick ad, and then we'll get to the Giants game, and we'll see if Matt ends up jumping back in. Not sure, but let's see if he ends up jumping back in, and we'll go from there. All right, so this ad, of course, is for Prize Picks. Prize Picks is the best place to turn your sports knowledge into cash. With millions of members, Prize Picks has made daily fantasy sports accessible to all. You just pick more or less on at least 2 players for a shot to win up to 2,000. That's right, 2,000 times your cash. Run your game all season long on Prize Picks. Do you know ball? There's only one series left in the playoffs, and the championship is officially on the line. That means time is running out for you to put your final takes, to the test on Prize Picks, the best place to cash in on your fantasy sports. You can, hey, listen, you can go. One of the things I love about it is you can actually mix. So if you want to, we know the basketball finals are going on, the hockey finals are going on as well. And so you can mix the hockey finals and the basketball finals as well together, include and throw in esports if you want to as well. So you can do all sorts of things. Every Tuesday, there's Taco Tuesday on there where they have 15 to 25% off of certain players. And every Friday is Flex Friday, where you can opt in for a flex play as well. What are you going to do? Download the app Prize Picks, put in the promo code CLNS, and you're going to get $50 instantly when you play your first $5 lineup. That's code CLNS for $50 instantly when you play your first $5 lineup. Prize Picks. Run your game. All right, he's back. Matt Chatham back in the house. We appreciate you coming back through. So let's get into this Giants game. And as we mentioned, this is the, it's not as exciting of a game as the Tennessee game. You want to, Matt St. Jean, this is a little confusing. Matt St. Jean, you want to set the scene again? We don't need to go through the starters again, but let's set the scene again for this game.
October 12th, 2003, again, 1 o'clock at Gillette Stadium. Now the Patriots are 3-2 after beating Tennessee the week before. Giants at this point are 2-2. Had a bye in week 3, which it's still crazy that buys were that early. And the Patriots would have a week 3 bye the year after this.
Right.
But they had a week 3 bye and then lost at home to Miami the week before this. The last time the Pats and Giants played was week 3, 1999. Patriots won that one 16-14. Pats favored by 2.5 points. The head coach for the Giants was Jim Fossil. He would resign at the end of the season, and I think that was it for him in the NFL. And this was a rainy game. Very muddy, very ugly conditions. The only note I'll make, so Mike Cloud's in the starting lineup for this one. I think Antoine Smith was out. Fullback Fred McCrary added to the lineup.
Fred,
he's in there.
San Diego teammate with Rodney. I think they were together as Chargers. Yeah.
Ty Law would start this one. I think he ended up sitting for a lot of this game, though. I don't think he played a ton because he was really playing through that injury. The funny thing when you watch the broadcast of this game, the first play from a scrimmage is the Giants turning the ball over. Ball's batted at the line, intercepted by Tyrone Poole. Patriots can't turn it into points. But right when it's picked off, the announcer's saying that, the notes that we got this week was the most important thing for this Giants offense is to not turn the ball over. And he can't even get to the talking point before the Giants have turned the ball over. Patriots can't convert. Giants get the ball back, run the ball the first play. Second play, handoff to the left side. Tyrone Poole dives inside of his blocker, makes contact with Tiki Barber in the backfield, who fumbled for, I think, the 4th time in 5 games there. And our man here, Johnny on the spot, Matt Chatham, picks that up and runs it back for a touchdown. So 2 of the first 3 plays for the Giants are turnovers. Patriots get a touchdown right away. And in some ways, that's kind of it. That's kind of it for the game. Not a very low scoring, very ugly game here. Patriots don't do a whole lot on offense at all. First half, actually, the Giants outgained the Patriots 198-30. Yeah. Brady had 1 completion in the first half, but the Giants could not stop turning the ball over. They had some missed field goals, and Patriots have a couple drives to start the second half where they score on it. They get out to 17-3 lead, and at that point, it's just too much for the Giants to overcome. Yeah. Final 3 Giants drives here. It's a turnover, pick to Rodney Harrison that was all on 4th down, a turnover on downs, and then a pick that actually Eugene Wilson picks it off. It's a funny clip to watch because the ball goes right through the hands of Antoine Harris. Yeah. And he's standing there looking at his hands like, oh, I can't believe I blew it. And then the crowd erupts because Wilson's behind him and he catches it. Yeah. Great. So much less eventful game.
Let's go back. Let's go back to that fumble because we did talk about it a little bit, right? But just describe that because only touchdown you ever scored in the NFL, right? And so just talk about that moment of, picking up that ball. It's just green grass ahead of you. Now, again, I told you I sit in the north end zone, and you scored that going to the south end zone.
South, yeah.
Right, because I still remember you picking it up, and I can see your back as you're running it with like a convoy of Patriots around you. But just talk about that moment when you score, at what it's like, and and what that feeling was like, and then of course kind of celebrating as you go to the sideline.
Right. So there's two things that go on in that play. Actually, three if you count T-Pool, the way he knifes in and sort of gets ball. It's not like he knew what he was doing. That I would actually use as coaching points. I coached 3 years of youth football here at KP when these kids were all middle school, and it's cool that I got to do what I got to do, but like literally three of those things that we're showing are drills that we actually have. It's kind of wild, right? So the idea of cutting the big guy, not being high on the back, T-Pool goes down low, it's good ball awareness, his hat's right on the ball. So, that's a foreign thing that we would talk about. But in my case, I had to beat, and this is like a drill that we'll often do where you throw the big cigar dummy or whatever, or blocking pad at knees, and you have to beat the cut, right? So I have Jim Finn coming at me, who's big fullback from, I think, Harvard, I believe he was, from the Giants. But anyway, Giants fullback is near back, so he's trying to cut me through the legs, and it's meant to be some sort of kick out block. I don't remember the run scheme, but it's direct run. So I've got to squeeze the play, make it nice and tight, beat the cut, and then still turn it back inside of me. But T-Pool's done the plus thing and knocked it out. So defeat the cut. Okay, I'm not on the ground. Stone it and get off of it. And then Bill was big on showing these moments where other guys would have that same opportunity, loose ball out in front of them, and there's a way to get it right. It's not a lot of guys will fall in, a lot of guys will bat it forward, but that sort of almost scooping motion and getting your hands under the ball and then pulling it up and securing, not going down with one. It's just he likes to bag on guys who do it wrong and make a point that this is kind of just a fundamental thing. And like you said, this is my one moment. I'm a defensive player, even in college. I don't think I scored any touchdowns in college either prior to this thing. So yeah, you don't have to get touch the ball much as a defensive player. When you do, it's kind of fun to have some open grass. But it was the only way to score is if I caught it clean, right? So if you fumble around with that, you can take one stride off, the cavalry does catch you. So, you had to beat the cut at the right time without losing a stride or two there to get to the ball in time to do it and be clean on get there. And like you mentioned, we kind of needed it because it wasn't a big day in offense. But that was also, fans will remember, that's still grass. I don't think they make the change to turf until 2006. So this was not only grass, but it was kind of a little bit rainy day, a little bit slick, a little bit muddy and kind of gross, but fun game for defense, man. We have a blast in those kinds of games. So, but again, I mentioned the Tennessee thing. I mean, they're not too terribly different in the way that they do things. The Giants, in my recollections, you got Monty Toomer, Shockley, Jeremy Shockey, excuse me, is their sort of, he's one of their most productive receivers, but he's technically playing tight end, right? And then they're very much back led with Tiki. Huge offensive line. That's kind of what, this is back to those times where the offensive line of the Giants is always perpetually one of the better in the league. So, that's just kind of how they're built. But like you mentioned, that the story of the game is they can't stop turning over, and nobody loves to talk about, winning turnover battle than Bill Belichick. So, from our perspective, I know from a fan that might not be as fun to watch those kind of games, but it's super fun for a defensive player to play in those where multiple turnovers, getting scores. On the particular run back that I had, Brewski it was kind of funny moment. So I go through and I often would do this corny in practice and stuff, celebration where I'd sort of jump. I'm actually looking at it. There's a picture on my wall here in my office of the celebration, and who's around me there. It's Eugene Wilson and Fife. But I jump and do sort of like an air guitar thing, right? It's just the corny old white guy from Iowa thing, I guess. But I jump and do the air guitar, and I did that and threw the ball down as I did it in my little celebration. And I run down the rest of the end zone celebrating with everyone, and you're kind of losing your mind at that point because you don't do this often. Brewski though had his head about him better than I did, and goes and grabs the ball and thinks he's going to want this ball. It's his touchdown ball. And he gave it to me kind of at the other corner as I'm circling back to the sideline, and I spiked it again. just thinking like, thanks, but I don't know, like, just not thinking. And then as we got back down over to the benches and sat down, they're like, hey, stupid, you were supposed to keep this thing, kind of thing. So, but that was always kind of a fun moment. And then what they always do is they take that ball, they'll wrap it in tape, and then in a marker or whatever, just write whose it was and what happened, so that one gets stored, put in the case, and then you get to keep it forever. So it's in a box somewhere, but guys are bringing up these old memories. I don't think I've had that thing out of a box in 20 years. So it's somewhere.
Yeah, that's cool though. It's I think obviously the ball is a cool keepsake to have, clearly, but like it's the memory, and then I'm sure you got pictures. As you mentioned, you get some pictures and stuff like that. That to me is more so the stuff than the football, I guess. Well, cool, but it's also
that photo is the cover of the Globe the next morning where I was up doing the thing, and it's not the one that I have here in the case, but I have a glossy of it, and I had Bon Jovi sign it on the air guitar thing, just because
awesome.
he's always around and all that stuff. But it was a fun moment for me. Obviously, it's a national audience game.
Yeah.
CBS, I believe, that week, and all of family and friends are watching because I'm going to play a little more, and had a good day. So it's obviously a fond memory for me.
You know what's interesting is it reminds me in 2019 against the Giants on a Thursday night, Kyle Van Noy, I think it was Kyle Van Noy, had like a fumble return for a touchdown on like a dark, rainy, kind of nasty night out. Very similar conditions, right?
Yeah.
And the Patriots, killed the Giants that night. But it was a Thursday night game, and I remember watching that. I wasn't there because my sister got married the next weekend, and it was like her rehearsal dinner. We held at my house, and so I wasn't at the game. But I remember watching the game and watching the fumble return for touchdown, thinking, "Oh my God, it looks exactly like Chatham's fumble return for touchdown." So it's just 16 years later.
Yeah.
Well, I'm at it's funny because I think Matt, you're 26, I think at this time. Pat, you're in college. I'm 5 years old. I'm like, my memories of this game, like my dad would get the championship DVDs when the Patriots won, and those things would be on repeat, and I would just watch that over and over. That's how I got into this. So I know these games. I'd never seen them on the broadcast until we were doing this. But that play in the rain, anytime that it was raining out and I was in my front yard and I was playing football, I was trying to recreate that, getting in the mud and everything.
So cool.
It was that one, and the next year, the game against Baltimore, that was really in a downpour and muddy.
Yeah.
There's a play in that one where Brewski, I think, sacks the quarterback and strip sacks him, and it's just like no one can grab the football. It rolls into the end zone. Jarvis Green ends up picking it up for a touchdown.
Yes, Jarvis. Yeah.
Those were the two I'd always try to recreate in my front yard when it got rainy enough.
That's awesome. Those games are fun, guys. And just for some like back context too here, remember, Bill came from New York, so he, a lot of familiarity, a lot of respect for the Giants. The Giants are also the team that we do camp with every year, right? So it used to be at Bryant College, and we're there, like a full week of 2-a-days with these guys. So you kind of get to know them a little bit. There's a lot of familiarity, even though you said we hadn't played games against one another for a long time. Like, the Giants guys a lot, probably as good as any other team that's not your own, because you see a lot of them. And, Bill and was it Coughlin then? Is it Coughlin by then, or was it still Fossil?
No. Fossil.
Fossil.
This year.
Okay, that's Fossil. Okay, but the point's still the same. I mean, it's just there's a lot of familiarity with the staffs and with the players, and we kind of you don't like become best friends, but when you do, do the exchanges like they do now, think of it like how they do now. Well, they'll do it for a couple days. We do like full weeks of these things, right? So you're almost at camp with another team, which is kind of weird. But so it was big. It's the huge New York market. It's us. We don't often play one another. You want to have a great day. So I can imagine how it will be digested today. Oh, what the hell is wrong with the offense? And that's all we talk about for the next week. But we're thinking, hey, defense is coming together, baby. We look great. That's kind of how you're feeling.
Well, I think that's one of the reasons we wanted to do this series too. Apart from it being 21 years since 21 wins, it was like, the Patriots here, you're hoping to build something. And we wanted to look back at a team that did build something to watch, what did it look like when it all came together week to week? What like, how did it feel? Because if we were doing our regular podcast, we'd be saying those things. We'd be saying, man, nice to get a win and to scrape one out, but you had 220 yards of offense and 110 yards of penalties. Like
Yeah.
there's a lot of that game you're saying, no, this isn't great.
Well, I mean, Brady goes 8 for 21 for 112 yards passing. Like, it's just like 8 for 21. Like,
Yeah.
is
It was
insane.
it was a gross day, if I remember. I mean,
Yeah.
it was definitely
It
one of
was
those days where
very bad
moving the
weather.
ball was going to be tough anyway. And then, like you said, you take a team that's struggling to hang on to it, and then you throw the elements into it anyhow, and it's going to be a mess. But I think what this game, just as sort of a takeaway, was important is it was sort of a just cobble it together kind of thing. And there's a lot of them in this 21 game streak. These are not all blowouts, right? Some of these are actually pretty ugly games, but like we mentioned in the week prior and this one, and it kind of goes on for the next month, we were beat up, man. There's, my position group was beat up, and that's why I was playing more. But secondary, back end stuff, and there's a lot of guys on that roster. I'm one of 10 other names you could name that really had role ascension in the middle of that to kind of hold it together, and had to play. I'm not an idiot. Like, I'm not going to play at Willie McGinnis's level, obviously, but to be able, and this would happen. This actually happened in the Tennessee game, at least best of my recollection, or maybe it was the Giants game. But you kind of come in warned. They say, "Hey, Matt, like Willie's there. Nobody runs to Willie's side. That's known. But hey, he's out. Backup's got to come in. They don't know much about you. They know you from camp, actually. And it used to be Howard Cross was a big tight end on the outside, and I actually had some good battles with him. So I don't think they thought they'd come in and just run right at me, because kind of the one skill I had. So, but you're going to be tested. I think that's kind of the point. Like, hey, backups are in. We would go at theirs. They were going to go at ours. Now you're one of them, right? So you kind of know that, hey, if there's a hole in the secondary, that guy might get challenged more. If there's a new guy in the front that doesn't have quite the same. I mean, Willie's 6'6" and 275. I'm 6'4", 255, right? So it's a different body type. If you're going to direct run and you want to kick out and put biggers on them, you're gonna test that kind of guy. So they tested me. So, and it went fine. So, and I think that's kind of, there's a lot of that going on in that roster throughout these games, that people were down, other people had to come in. They don't have to play Pro Bowlers, but it just has to be, you play at a competent level enough so that there's not some new hole. And I think we did a pretty good job across the roster patching and making that thing work. And for me personally, it was huge and important experience to kind of let that staff and any other future staff know that I could do it. So you're going to want me on your team over the course of a year, because maybe if it comes up, how I'll play. So that stuff is big for careers. And, you're talking to me, but there's 10 other guys, like I said, that got a lot out of this stretch to kind of prove that they could contribute.
Yeah.
I mean, Mike Cloud in the game before this is very much like that was, yeah. And another name from that team that I always remember for some reason is Dedrick Ward at wide receiver. He catches a big touchdown
Former Jet,
against the Colts.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Really good returner
And,
for a while. Yeah. There's a lot of, like I mentioned Tommy earlier, Tom Ashworth, good friend, and from those days. I mean, Tom is practice squad guy earlier, like I said, converted tight end, but now he's huge, and he ends up being a starting level right tackle and getting a good deal in Seattle after his years here. So it was, there's examples like that all over the roster. Eugene Wilson was a corner at Illinois more. He ends up being a back end guy, and they needed him to be so because of stuff going on back there, and they had sort of, I think, drafted him. I mean, I'm not in the war room stuff, obviously, but like, I think we all thought that was a corner, and you'd go through those OTAs and rookie camps and stuff, and the early offseason stuff. And I want to say Gino took corner reps back then, and eventually made his way back to free safety alongside Rodney, and Asante, of the two, ended up looking like he was going to be the long-term corner guy. So, there was just a lot of team learning going on, because we were trying to figure out who we were as much as anything.
Wilson's awesome, and the highlights of him are great. I mean, he wouldn't be able to play in today's NFL with all the hits to the head and jumping and everything else. But man,
he and Rodney both.
He was awesome. He was awesome to watch. A little fun fact here from another Matt Manito. Dedrick Ward, first guy with the number in the teens to get a TD pass from Tom Brady. So a little fun fact for you over there.
Fun fact. There you go.
Some other trivia from this game. Asante Shenko, tight end.
Yep.
His first ever NFL catch came this week in this game.
So wasn't Rivers there still too, right?
Yeah. So it was Marcellus Rivers, Jeremy Shockey, and Asante Shenko.
Yeah, so Shockey and Rivers were the two, and then Shenko was this new big guy. Yeah.
Who I think they said something on the broadcast about him getting like into a fight with coaches that week in practice or something. Like there was something going on there.
Don't know.
Yeah, so I'm not quite sure the full story on that one.
Yeah.
But that was going on. Another name, unfortunately, that pops up a couple times in this one. That is going to be the man from Super Bowl 42, David
Goodness
Tyree.
sake.
He
Okay.
he was playing special teams in this one, and
Yep.
he draws a penalty on a punt block,
Mm.
draws a hold, and
Okay.
then later in the game, he then hits the punter on a punt block. So that's one of those. It's like, oh wow, like when you think about in the NFL, contracts or rookie contracts over 4 years.
Yeah.
You don't think about the fact that if he's playing for the Giants in 2007, he's also there for that 2003 game.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. And Tyree, so these names all mean different things to me than I think obviously most Patriot fans, but definitely with I guess I'm not going to go through the entire list, but obviously on our team, guys like Larry Izzo and Don Davis and Patrick Pass and Gerard Cherry. Yeah, Cherry. We have our group. Twan Harris, you mentioned him earlier. We've got our group as sort of core dudes, one of the best core team guys group in the NFL for a long period of time. But Tyree was kind of, like an Izzo, like the name you knew on, really that side in the entire NFC. So that's who he always is to me. He does have that goofy helmet catch, and that breaks hearts. I know, I get that in New England,
Yeah.
but when you think about David Tyree, I actually really think that was one of the better. He was known more as a really really good teams guy to me. I don't live in a different sphere.
Well, which I think is so interesting because it's kind of a bygone era, and I know that there's a few guys in the league that do it.
Yeah.
But you had so many guys, and especially on the Patriots, you had so many guys that took real pride in playing special teams.
Yeah.
And really looked at it as an art, right? And was kind of like their position. And of course, you guys, and you played defense, obviously, and these other guys Larry Izzo played defense at times as well. And of course, he had the which we'll talk about later on, had the interception, the game-sealing interception against Buffalo to end the 2003 season, but or regular season at least. But so many like guys that they played other positions, but really were primarily special teams guys and took some real pride in it. And it was, it's still a third phase of the game. It's still an important part of the game. But I think back then it was viewed a little bit differently, I think. And I think is awesome because that's a huge part of the game of football.
Well, yeah, I mean, especially when we go through a lot of these ugly games that happen throughout the 21. Obviously, there's some really pretty ones in there too, but there are some games where we needed to generate field position, and we were just a killer group on punts and kicks. We weren't going to give up yards, so we could pin people. And as good as that defensive group was, they weren't going to move it much. So it was really important that you don't give chunks in that area because we got a great defense. The last thing you want to do is give up a 30-yard play that the defense never would, right? So. But we took a lot of pride in that because you can really affect the game that way. And we had Troy Brown's one of the best punt returners in the league at the time, and K Falk on kicks. I mean, we can get chunks too. And in our view, and I still think this, if I can, get a guy to the ground, throw him out of bounds, body slam him, whatever, and create a hole that those guys run through that ends up being a 30-yard return that would have been a 10 if I hadn't done that. That can impact the game just as much as the guy who catches a 15-yard pass. So like and Bill would hammer this. Like he's like, yeah, everyone here has an opportunity to affect it positively. And we just need a couple of these a game. So we would have a group of guys that just wanted to dominate their position and understood in doing so, you could really, really, it really changed the game, and we did. So we're proud of it, and that's how it was.
And you know what? Of all the things, like that to me is the true Patriot way. When you think about like the fact that every single person on the team can impact the team, on every play, whether it's a punt return or a punt or a kickoff or a kick return or anything, right? An extra point or an extra point block or whatever, right? That's those little plays all add up to winning. And like you say, in this 21 game streak, and we'll talk about some of them, there are some nasty, ugly games in here. And this Giants one is kind of one of them, right? But it's all those little plays added up, kind of get you that victory,
For sure.
And then in the big picture of the season too, it's, the fact that you're able to scoop up a ball cleanly and return it for a touchdown. The fact that Mike Cloud is able to make those plays, gets you through some of these games so that later in the season, when you get to the playoffs, you got to play co-MVP Steve McNair. You got to play co-MVP Peyton Manning. You got those games at home, which puts you at an advantage. And it's not exactly the same, but I look at what was it last year with the Chiefs when they won all those close games, and it was like, okay, they were injured and they still won these close games. You had a chance to put them in a spot to punish them for the fact that they were hurt, take advantage of that, and make them go play on the road in the playoffs. And then it just doesn't happen. You're just not able to take advantage of some of that stuff. They win games, and then by the end of the year, they're healthy and starting to do stuff like that 03 team. You guys get healthy by the end of the year, and you're able to really control some games. I think that AFC Championship game against Peyton Manning probably ends up being the peak of that in some ways, of dominance on both sides of the ball, really in all three phases of the game. That one.
Yeah, and I think if the Tennessee game provides a pretty good sort of flip side, because it was a dramatically different game. I mean, that's the super cold game. Granted, there's weather involved there as well, but it's just craziness in that October game in the second half, and ended up being a lot higher than we want it to be. And you come back and you're in this real sort of dogfight thing in the playoffs. So in a low scoring game. So, that's just, every game's different. And like you said, I think we all kind of understood what we had, but just had to get us all healthy and had to, keep it together until we got there.
That's interesting.
I think we should put this in some context here, by the way, because Matt had mentioned before the media market part of this. What we didn't mention is that this was in the middle of the Red Sox-Yankees ALCS. So Game 3, the infamous game where Pedro Martinez and Don Zimmer get into a fight, was the day before this.
Oh, wow.
So that kind of colors, you watch the broadcast back, and that's the context they're putting it in. It's part of a rivalry between the cities. This is just one installment in that. Game 4 was supposed to be that night because of the rain and the bad weather. It ends up getting moved. They were also talking about something, I don't know how much either of you guys know about this, in that series that I'd never heard about, that there was a fight in the bullpen between two Yankee players and a Fenway groundskeeper in Game 3 the night before. So there's a break-in during the game where they're the guys at Fenway, and they're and we're going to give you more at halftime about what's going on in this investigation into who hurt these Yankee players or whatever. Just those little moments that I'm sure at the time, that's big story, big emotions, that's coloring the rivalry, and now it's just kind of been lost as part of the story.
It's interesting. It's interesting. Matt, thank you so much for the time here. Before we let you go, I want to kind of wrap some things up, but obviously we're just talking about these two games, but what an accomplishment. Obviously you win back-to-back Super Bowls. Incredible. Unbelievable to win back-to-back Super Bowls, but to have your name along with your teammates on both teams, right, to be etched in history with, 21 games in a row. Is that something you guys look back on and talk about it or think about it? And was that something that was kind of, listen, we know the Patriots are thinking about it as an organization because they came out with the ticket that said 19 in a row, which is one of the most insane moves of all time. But in the locker room, was that something that you guys really took some pride in and really cared about? And I don't know if you really cared about it necessarily, but really thought about kind of leading up to it. And then even today, if you think about it still.
I would say if you guys weren't doing this pod, this doesn't stand out to me until I start sort of going through the recollections and putting it in better perspective and realizing how big of a deal it was. But I think this is one of the, it's so cool that we did that, but it wasn't the goal. So it's sort of like in the sidecar along with us on this amazing ride kind of deal. The Super Bowl's the goal, right? And it's more of a, you get back into the next season, you realize, oh wow, yeah, that number's still going, right? This is still tolling. Let's see where this goes. And yes, I think towards the end of it, you get a little more invested in the idea of what the number is. Certainly not much during that first season. It just more became oh man, like you said, it's starting to show up on a ticket, or it's showing up on the front of a program, or it's showing up as the headline in the paper for the game, and you kind of can't avoid it at that point. But no, I just think it's one of the many feathers that we have from that era. But there's so much cool stuff. Sometimes it's hard to figure out what resonated the most, I guess. But it's obviously Super Bowls first and foremost. But some of these stats, I think, as much as anything, just help you appreciate how good what we were doing was. But you weren't maybe grasping it as it was happening necessarily.
It's an interesting point, right? I think because we look at, obviously the Patriots finished 16-0,
Mm.
only time that any team's ever done that,
Yeah.
but they lose the Super Bowl. And so we don't really like to talk about the 16-0, right? Now, obviously, to go to win 21 straight games, you got to win a Super Bowl, right? So obviously you did that in there. But I don't think if the 04 season finishes with a loss in the Super Bowl or with a loss in the AFC Championship game,
Yeah.
I don't think it's as big of a deal.
No.
And obviously the Patriots would celebrate and everything, but I don't think it would be as big of a deal as it is now because the team won back-to-back Super Bowls.
Right.
And then also won the 21 games in a row. And so to your point, yeah, the 21 games is incredible and it's really cool and it's something to look back on in history.
Mm-hmm.
But really, the story is the back-to-back Super Bowl championships.
Yeah, because remember that. Well, I mean, I'm jumping way ahead to when you guys end this whole series, but this thing ends in Pittsburgh, right? So that leaves a terrible taste in our mouth. We leave pissed off, and the real thing we're after is then the focus is sort of shifted. So it's it's the NFL's like that. You gotta these seasons are really long. They're very tiring. You've invested a lot of time and energy into it. You're losing chunks of your body with every year. Contracts are up. There's all the team drama and just there's so much going on. So there are these nice things like this that kind of will attract your attention for a bit and give you maybe a little extra carrot as you're going through the thing, but ultimately, you're trying to get to the end. You're trying to play in the final game and win it. So it's kind of like, oh, that was cool, and man, that sucked in Pittsburgh. But let's refocus because we're here to do the real thing.
Yeah. It is funny you talk about the end goal. One other note for something that happened this week, which is something that I caught kind of watching the game as oh wow, I didn't realize that's happening at the same time. Same week, Panthers at Colts, game that goes to overtime, fantastic game. Those are the two teams you got to beat back to back and to win in the Super Bowl at the end.
Right,
And that's a Panthers team that kind of comes out of nowhere.
Right.
People knew the Colts could be good. I think this is when it was finally starting to really come together for them.
Yeah.
So is there a moment when you're watching teams? I don't even know, like, how much around the league are you following when you're playing? Are you just you find out the Panthers are good when you get to the playoffs and you see that they're also here?
I remember being relatively oblivious to it all, to be honest, guys. Like, I mean, I think there are years in there where the Colts are starting to ascend and they're starting to be sort of a chief-like kind of today talked about team because they're pretty and they move the football and they score and Peyton was up first overall and all that stuff.
Yeah.
So but beyond that, the teams that we ran into, that were our hurdles to settle this history. I mean, teams like the Panthers, that was a massive year for them. I mean, that was a big sort of change in their own sort of story arc, and they had pumped a ton of talent in there. A teammate of mine later with the Jets, Chris Jenkins, is like the best defensive player in the NFL, and just an absolute monster. And we've got to face Chris with Russ Hochstein filling in because we've got an injury in the offensive line, and what's his name? Miami Hurricanes defensive lineman Warren Sapp's talking shit on TV about how shitty Russ is, and I knew him when he was in Tampa with me, and he's no good, and we're hearing that, and just just like, this guy's an idiot, and like, watch what Russ does. And Russ played the game of his life. I mean, had a lot of one-on-one situations without help where he had to do well with Chris Jenkins. And man, I know him as a teammate. That is a load. That's but that's another sort of situation similar to what we're talking about now. Something happens, someone has to adjust. Russ had a legendary performance and it helped us get through. But the whole point, though, is more about these other teams are, kind of trying to chart their path. And there's a lot of other stories we ruined, quite frankly, for other franchises. The story of the Colts would be entirely different if the Patriots didn't exist. The Panthers may have gotten their one, and who knows where that group goes to the wide receiver group, and quarterback is strong, defense is great, maybe more of the guys stay. But you can do this with a lot of teams. Jacksonville's another team that had some really close teams, and we just kind of kept them back, and the whole franchise's history looks different because of it. So, I mean, that's kind of what's fun with all this. Like, there are a lot of teams there who, what does the NFL look like if the Patriots aren't there during that 4-year span? There's a few different teams whose organization arc I think looks a lot different.
That's very
another
true.
team I'll mention here, Kansas City Chiefs. They won that week to go 6-0 at that point. They're kind of,
I would never have remembered that.
I was just looking around the league too to see, what else happened. A crazy game. They're up in Lambeau. They're down 31-14. They come all the way back, end up winning 40-34. in overtime, which is
Yeah.
like that's when it was just like that's the game of the week, and no one's really noting that, like the Carolina game, and no one's noticing that the Super Bowl champions playing on a muddy field in Foxborough,
Yeah.
when the city of Boston's more focused on the baseball team than the
Baseball
football team.
game. Yeah.
Yeah. That's interesting. Interesting.
Crazy how that happens. I do.
Matt,
Since you
go
mentioned
ahead.
Super Bowl 38, I actually do have one other question here, quick, because he's a special teamer. The Brian Kinchin story for Super Bowl 38, the long snapper.
Yep.
There's a story about him cutting his hand on a dinner knife, buttering a roll the night before that Super Bowl. You're playing special teams.
Morning of.
How much?
Morning of. That was
morning.
that was
how
at
much
the
of
team.
that are you aware of?
Happened at the team breakfast. There was a scene. I mean, I believe Scott Pioli has told this story on video. A couple of other guys are sort of cryptically. It's been written about a little bit. So, I think for a long time we kind of just didn't share the details, but it's pretty much out there now. But it was crazy. And Kench did a great job. And he had been a school teacher, I believe. He had snapped for a long time in the NFL, but was a way older guy in his 40s, I think, by then, or maybe just late 30s. But it felt like he was in his 40s. And he's a thinner guy, kind of workout warrior, but probably not with his NFL body at that point either, but he can shoot it through his legs, and we just need him to get through this because LP, Lonnie Paxton LP, the longtime guy who's usually there, I believe had a knee injury and was gone. So, I'm next to Kench as the right guard on punt and all that stuff. And I think there were some balls that bounced back to Kenny as the punter and as the holder, so it was rough for him. And I think the good part of the story, the great part of the story is that when it mattered most, he pulled it together and fired a good one back there, and they got it down and got the kick through. But I gotta say, there weren't some nervous moments on the sidelines with the kicking net, and we're all kind of looking at each other going, "Oh boy," But yeah, I think the deal was he cut his, I don't know if it was his thumb or whatever it was, with trying to cut a dinner roll or something like that with a steak knife or something like that.
That's
so
crazy.
I just remember a lot of blood and a scene at the team breakfast, and not thinking much of it, and finding out later he's dealing with something on the Super Bowl Sunday of all days.
And that's insane that it happened at and we had known that it had happened at some point, but for it to have happened that morning at team breakfast in front of the whole team is pretty unbelievable. That's pretty wild.
It was wild.
So,
all right, I got to run. We went long, which is I'm totally fine. My wife is killing me. We actually had, and this is my company, we had some my Gold Bark. We have Gold Bark panko going, so we have fried tenderloin sandwiches tonight and we went through this whole thing. I know, I'm doing this on the phone with you guys, and I keep getting messages, and she's asking. It's in the deep. We have an old commercial deep fryer from the restaurants I used to own in the kitchen, and she's saying, how many minutes per side? And I'm doing the 2 first side, 1 for so. So we juggled a podcast and
I love it.
Some Gold Bark.
Before you go, Rub Smoke Love, right? Is it Rub Smoke Love?
Yeah, Rub Smoke Love, rubsmokelove.com. I should be able to say my own company's name a little better, right? Rubsmokelove.com. You'll know the big brands. It's Gold Bark, which is our rub.
Yep.
We also have a bold version and beef cake. So Rub Company, we make panko, we make smoked salts, we glaze nuts, gift boxes, all that kind of stuff. Over 2.5 years now, we'll be over 400 stores this summer. So
fantastic.
Things are going great. We're having a blast.
That's great. Thanks so much for coming on. I appreciate it. And get out and buy some Rub Smoke Love for sure. Enjoy the food tonight, Matt.
All right.
Thank
you guys. Take care.
Take care. All right. That was great. So that's it. We're just going to wrap it up. But Matt had to run.
Any final thoughts on these two games? Because we heard a lot from Matt there, but I want to hear, just looking at these games again as someone who was in college at the time.
Yeah.
And now with the lens of
and
everything we've seen.
Both of those games.
Yeah, with the lens of what we've seen in the 21 years since in Foxborough, what's it like looking back at them?
It's interesting because, being at both those games, it's fascinating because, again, for me, and he said the Mike Cloud game, which is funny, that's how I remember it too, the Tennessee game. I remember that Mike Cloud move where I think that guy's still standing there, right? That he juked out of his shoes. And then, the Chatham game, the next game, right? And so kind of all those games kind of blend together, and you're wondering, okay, what happens here? But yeah, I don't remember my exact mindset going into that game, but I do, I don't. It's funny. It's fun for me to go back because he played in those games, so obviously he's got a little bit more connection to it than I do. But I remember a lot of those games and a lot of those different things and a lot of those moments that happened. But the specifics of it are fuzzy to me, right? So it's fun to go back and have watched these games again and be like, oh yeah, I remember that play, and oh my god, and seeing the touchdown pass to Troy Brown was so fun because it was the exact same play. And obviously it wasn't, but it looked exactly the same as the play in Miami 2 weeks later, where he literally shuffles to the left, sticks his arm out, and stiff arms the back of his offensive lineman, resets himself, and then fires it deep, long and deep to Troy Brown. And it's just like, it's unbelievable that it looked exactly the same as the one in Miami. And so it's fun to kind of go back and watch those things with hindsight and knowing, what happened. And so, that's always fun, and so, yeah, those years this is going to be a lot of fun because those years were a ton of fun. And so for anyone that lived through those, anyone that was old enough to remember the team and watch those games, it's fun kind of going back and looking at these. And of course, the Miami game, which we'll talk about next week, is one of the most memorable games in Patriots history, in my opinion.
Yeah, that's a moment right there.
Yeah, and then the Browns one is memorable for me, and we'll talk about that later in the week. But the Browns one's memorable for me. So,
yeah, I love it. Just for any other, I'm just going through my notes here to make sure there's nothing else that I missed.
I got everything.
One of them. You mentioned the Tom Brady pass against Tennessee. He had one against the Giants. About 5.5 minutes left in the third quarter. The 39-yard pass down the sideline to David Patton. He just drops it in a bucket. Like, it's ridiculous throw, and it's one of those that's like, I don't know. It sets up the touchdown to Mike Cloud, a run behind Dan Klecko. But it's one of those throws that it's not going to be in a highlight reel because it's not a touchdown. It's not in a big game, and you just don't see it anymore. And that was one of those throws that I watched it, I was like, damn. Like Tom Brady's good, but then you still have these moments where he surprises you.
Yep, he was that dude. So
yeah. But I think if there was anything else in these that was like particularly notable that needed to be, I mean, the sheer number of Patriots penalties for like this team was not disciplined at all.
Yeah, it's interesting, and that's one of those things where Vrabel's talking about it, and we kind of chatted about this off air, but Vrabel talks about capitalizing on bad football, and the Patriots played a lot of great football, obviously, in this 21 game win streak, and winning back-to-back Super Bowls, but there's a lot of bad football in there too, a lot of bad football, and but at the end of the day, they make enough plays to win. And look, there's a lot of penalties and a lot of turnovers, but they win this turnover battle 5-0, right? And so even though there's a lot of mistakes and a lot of mental errors, they're turning the other team over. They're making big plays in those big moments. Matt Chatham isn't falling on the football. He's scooping it up and scoring a touchdown, right? And so even though they have these undisciplined moments, because they're well coached, because they pay attention to those details, those things matter. And those ultimately wind up making the difference in those games.
Yeah. I got two other final notes here, and I'm done with I will have emptied my notebook. One of them, I was surprised how differently they talked about fourth downs then, in kind of both directions. Because there's a moment where the Patriots go forward on 4th and 1 from like the edge of field goal range, and at no point in it is there a real discussion about if they should go for it. It's just kind of like, oh yeah, it's 4th and 1, they're going for it. Which feels totally different from today, where that situation is hyper analyzed one direction or the other.
Yeah.
And then there is a point where I think the Giants are like, it's like 4th and 4, and they're just outside of field goal range, and there's not even in that one. There's also not a discussion about going for it. They just punt it, and I'm like, okay. In a game like this, I kind of feel like they would end up. Maybe it's this game. That might actually be the next game. I think I might have accidentally. I'm watching all these games in a row, and now they're starting to blend together for me, so I may have jumped ahead on that one. That might be from the Dolphins game. But just the way fourth downs are discussed. And then the only other one, because I think one of the fun parts of rewatching the games is looking at the game breaks, where they just show, here's something happened in another game. Same day, Eagles-Cowboys. The Eagles decide they're going to open up the game with a surprise onside kick. It does not fool the Cowboys, who pick it up and return it for a touchdown. That was Randall Williams was the guy who returned that for a touchdown and wins Special Teams Player of the Week. He did not play he played in the NFL for 6 years, had 471 total receiving yards across 6 years as a backup wide receiver, and then apparently tight end, according to Pro Football Reference.
Had one heck of a play though. Scored a touchdown, and it's
Yeah.
pretty sweet. I will say the analytics
Well-
stuff is interesting, but that's you got to remember now. Moneyball takes place in 2002, and so the analytics doesn't really get introduced into sports at all until the year before this, and that's in baseball. And it takes a while to get adopted. Of course, it's helped along by the Red Sox because they are employing Bill James, and so of course, it kind of takes over baseball, and then slowly the other leagues are kind of catching wind of it, and they're saying, well, we can do this analysis as well, and we can use all of this data and information to inform our decisions as well. And so it is interesting.
I will say, from everything that's been talked about, the way that Bill Belichick and Ernie Adams were analyzing football at this point, I think is something, if they were doing it now, we would call analytics. I think it was very similar.
Yep.
It's just not getting the publicity at the time. So, it's not in like nerd stuff with football. Like, it's really, with the numbers, really not a thing until like 2016. I feel like is when that era is when it really starts to come into it. So at this point, nobody's thinking about that. But I look at the Patriots. The Patriots go for it on fourth down plenty throughout this from what we've watched so far, and you have to think, looking back, that's an advantage for them. The fact that they're just willing to go do it.
I agree, and I think part of it is because you can't put a cute name on it. There's no stats that they came up with. They didn't invent any stats. They weren't talking about it like it was a mathematical or statistical thing, and so therefore it's not looked at as that. But it certainly was. I agree with you. Yeah. So,
and there's also, because it wasn't a thing at the time, it's not a hot button issue, so you don't have the debate around it that leads to some of the notoriety.
Very true. Very true.
Yeah.
So, all right. Well, this was a ton of fun. We're going to be doing, again, like Matt said, 11 straight of these. And so buckle up. We got a bunch more. And later on this week, we got the Miami Dolphins and the Cleveland Browns. So stick around for those. Those are two, again, one really fun game, one muddy, sloppy, gross game, which kind of matches up with these two. So, but anyway, stick around for those. We appreciate you guys tuning in. Thank you to Matt Chatham for coming on. Again, rubsmokelove.com. Get on there and get all the gold bark you can buy because the heck of a product. So thank you to him, and it's been a ton of fun. Thank you to the chat as always, and be good to each other and go Pats.